Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us in our inaugural Let's Get Technical discussion. Since we can't get in our automobiles and come and visit you folks and look you in the eye, we're thinking that this is probably the next best thing to convey information to you. Uh, we're going to keep these short, maybe 10, 15 minutes, so we're not going to entertain any questions or comments during the discussion, but you are more than welcome to send any comments, questions, suggestions to us on the website that you see there on the screen. It's also shown over here. We plan to do one of these every other week, and we're going to be talking about textures on pressed pavers today. The future topics are going to be pressed brick versus pressed paver, beveled edges on pavers, options for and against using that, how we go about sending samples to folks, some specialty products that we offer, and we're going to talk about some pretty prominent projects that we've worked on over the years. Porcelain, website navigation, and obviously there's going to be more than that. But we plan to do one of these every other week on a Tuesday at this time. Our topic for today is titled, What's Your Level of Aggregate Exposure? And that has to do specifically with textures that we apply to pavers, to the pressed pavers. And when we're talking about pressed pavers, we're talking about units that range in size from 6-inch by 18-inch all the way up to 24-inch by 48-inch. So these are larger format pavers, not the interlocking type of concrete pavers. And that'll be our next topic, how those compare to the larger format pavers. So primarily today, we're talking about different options that you have on textures for the pressed pavers. First of all, we do have an option when we're making these larger format pavers to just handle that texture process in the mold. So here we have an example of what we refer to as our detectable warning pavers. These units conform to ADA with respect to the truncated domes, height of the dome, spacing of the dome, etc. Here's an example of what we call a slate face paver, where we just have an irregular surface on the unit. And that's all done in the molding process. But what we're going to talk about primarily is the pressed paver. Now, keep in mind that everything that Hanover makes, whether it's a larger format paver, the interlocking paver, asphalt pavers, etc., are all made from a single mix. So any coloring or aggregate that you see on the surface of that unit goes the whole way through it. And see if we can see here in our example, if you take a look at that cross section, you can see that everything is solid. Now, there are some manufacturers who will produce their products using a lamination process where they'll take a specific aggregate blend and put that on the surface of the unit, and then underneath that, they'll just use a standard concrete mix. A lot of times what that's telling you is that that manufacturer does not have a good source for many different types of aggregates readily available to them. They've got to transport them over long distances, so they'll use concrete in the base of the product, using indigenous aggregates, and then the fancier stuff they laminate on the top. So everything we make is made from a single mix, and this is a hydraulically pressed material. Some people will specify a concrete, precast concrete unit paver, and that's a bit of a misnomer. Precast denotes cast stone, where we're taking a wet mix, putting that in a fiberglass mold, letting that sit overnight, taking it out of the mold the next day. This material is hydraulically pressed, so we take a pretty wet mix, we put it in a machined mold, and then we hydraulically press that with thousands of pounds of pressure, and And that manufacturing process will allow us within a very short period of time to be able to take that out of the mold, bring it up, stand it on its side. The texture that you see here, can we tighten up on this, please? When the paver comes out of the mold, this is the texture that you'll see on it. It's the same on the front and also on the back. We call it a stipple. So, and the color that we're showing here, I chose this color because it shows up well on the camera and it can really show you the distinction between the different textures. So, and this particular product is available in about 4,000 different colors, and that's achieved by using different types of cement, different types of aggregates, pigments, etc. But if you're going to pay to put that aggregate into the mix, obviously you want to expose it. So this is the material, what we would consider in its raw state. Options that we have for exposing that aggregate, we can sandblast it, we can, and with the blasting process, we can actually control the intensity of the blast. So we can expose more aggregate or less aggregate. And so here's an example of what we call Tudor finish, which is probably our meat and potatoes, where we just blast the surface of the unit and expose the aggregate. Some people don't want to see that much aggregate, so we can also do what we call finish 13. Same process, we just don't hit it as hard and expose as much of the aggregate in the mix. Other options, depending on the mix design and the size of the aggregates that are being used, if we're using a real fine aggregate in the mix, we may not be able to do this, but for most mixes, this is available. This is a heavy Tudor. So we've got regular Tudor, finish 13, which is a lighter blast, and a heavy Tudor where we actually hit the product a little bit harder. Another option for the product is what we call a ground finish. There we can grind the surface of the unit. It's more of a honing process. Don't think of it as polished, but we hone it to flatten the aggregate out, kind of making it look a little bit like terrazzo. And then another option would be to, after we grind it, would be to do the Tudor finish on it. Most of the time, that's what when people want to use that texture, that's what we'll do here for an exterior application, because some people will view this as having not enough coefficient of friction. So here, by doing this, we can roughen it up a little bit. We flatten the aggregate, expose more of the aggregate, but that will give it a greater coefficient of friction. That is everything that I have. Again, if any of you folks have any questions or comments, you're more than welcome to respond to the website that you see. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have, either by mail or by telephone, if we feel that that's more appropriate. Thank you very much for your time.